Have you ever felt like you're, I don't know, hiking up this endless career mountain? Like you're just waiting to reach some blurry, magical career nirvana at the very top?
Right, and then you get there and realize that place might not even, exist.
Exactly. It's exhausting. And today we're basically dismantling that mountain. We're doing a deep
Yeah.
dive into Emma Gannon's 2018 book, The Multi-Hyphen Method.
Such a great source. It really changed the conversation.
It really did. And the mission here is to shortcut you, the listener, right past that modern burnout. We're pulling out the exact tools you need to bypass those outdated 9-to-5 roadmaps and actually build a custom-tailored career that fits your actual life.
Yeah, and it's a critical shift to understand, especially right now, because, we are looking at a fundamental change in how human beings interface with the economy.
Yeah.
That traditional job for life, that singular path our grandparents relied on, it's completely dead. It's been permanently disrupted by the internet.
Oh, totally dead.
So what we are exploring today is why becoming a multi-hyphenate, which basically means someone with multiple income streams or professional identities, it isn't just insecure job hopping.
Right, which is the big fear, right? Like, am I just a gig worker with no stability?
Exactly. People fear that. But when it's done right, it's actually a deliberate strategy for taking your power back in this highly unpredictable landscape.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer amount of time we give over to our employers is genuinely staggering. If you add it all up, we spend about 12 entire years of our lives at work.
12 years just sitting there.
Yeah. And here is the kicker. 15 months of that time is just overtime.
Oh, wow.
Unpaid extra hours that just bleed into our evenings and weekends. Yet despite dedicating a massive chunk of our brief existence on Earth to this, we're mostly still following these roadmaps drawn up decades ago.
Right, for a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Literally. I remember sitting in a high school counselor's office in like 2007, and they were still handing out these glossy, standard, multiple-choice brochures.
Oh, I know exactly the ones you mean.
Right. And your options were basically vet, teacher, or lawyer. Pick one.
That's it. Pick your lane at 18.
Exactly. And by the time graduation actually rolled around, those guys were laughably obsolete. I mean, the jobs most of us are doing today, they hadn't even been invented yet.
No, they hadn't. And that brochure is the perfect symbol of the problem. It relies on the central myth of the modern workplace, which is this idea of the singular linear career ladder.
Yes, the latter.
We are culturally programmed to pick one subject to master, find one entry-level job, and just spend 40 years climbing rung by vertical rung. But a multi-hyphenate lifestyle completely shatters that model.
It has to, right, because the ladder is broken.
Exactly. Instead of a rigid ladder, we should be looking at what Sheryl Sandberg described as the career jungle gym. Or Kara Melchers called it a climbing frame, complete with tunnels, slides, and ropes.
I love that image so much, because if you're on a single ladder and you lose your grip, like, say your industry gets disrupted or your department downsizes, you fall all the way to the ground.
It's a huge drop. You're starting from zero.
Right. But if you're on a climbing frame, you just, grab a different rope.
Yeah.
It feels so much more resilient. It's like if the old career was a rigid set menu at a restaurant where you just eat whatever the corporation serves you, being a multi-hyphenate is like walking into a career Build-A-Bear workshop.
Build-A-Bear, I love that.
You construct your professional identity exactly how you want it, stuffing it with your highly specific, weird little interests and skills.
And we see incredibly vibrant examples of what that looks like in practice in the source material. There's an 87-year-old woman who decided she wanted to launch a website to sell her knitted goods globally.
At 87. That's amazing.
Yeah. And in the same breath, there is a 12-year-old girl teaching violin over Skype to other kids on completely different continents.
Oh, wow.
You even have highly specialized professionals, like a successful surgeon who spends their days operating in their downtime running a popular food blog. It's this intricate mishmash of identities that just refuses to be boxed into a single noun at a dinner party.
Wait, so let me challenge you on this right out of the gate. Because being a multi-hyphenate sounds incredibly empowering if you're like a teenager teaching violin or some influencer on a beach.
Sure.
But what if you're just a tired parent who wants to clock out at 5 p.m. and pay a mortgage? Isn't juggling 3 different hyphens, like a day job, a side hustle, and an online store, isn't that just a recipe for a totally different kind of modern burnout?
That is a very fair critique.
Are we just, romanticizing having 3 jobs to make ends meet?
Yeah, and it's a trap people fall into when they view the multi-hyphenate method simply as working more hours. But the goal here isn't to exhaust yourself with 3 full-time jobs. It is about autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And diversifying your intellectual and financial portfolio.
Okay, so it's not just about grinding more.
No, not at all. What's fascinating here is that taking this approach is demonstrably better for your long-term success, even within traditional corporate structures. Data from a massive LinkedIn study really drives this home. Yeah, they analyzed 459,000 members who worked at major consulting firms over a 20-year period. And they tracked who actually made it to the executive level.
Let me guess. I assume it wasn't the people who just kept their heads down and climbed the vertical ladder in one single department.
Precisely. The professionals who sidestepped across multiple entirely different departments were significantly more successful at reaching the executive tier.
Wow.
Think about the underlying mechanism there. If you only ever work in marketing, you only understand marketing's problems.
Right, you have blinders on.
Exactly. But if you spend time in marketing, then slide over to logistics, and then do a stint in human resources, you developed a systemic view of the entire organization.
That makes a lot of sense. You're building a broader toolkit.
Adaptability, lateral movement, adding diverse strings to your bow, it gives you a massive analytical advantage. Being a jack of all trades used to be hurled as an insult. But today, cognitive flexibility is your absolute best defense against an unpredictable economy.
Yeah, you aren't waiting for some gatekeeper to tap you on the shoulder. You are actively building this unique matrix of value.
Frankly.
But, I mean, if lateral movement and multiple identities are so beneficial, why do so many of us still feel completely trapped? Like if you're listening to this on your commute right now, think about your typical workday.
Oh, it's heavy.
Why does the daily grind feel so heavy if we have all this empowering technology right in our pockets? Well, the research highlights a massive friction between our modern digital tools and the incredibly outdated rules of the physical workplace.
The clash is very real.
It's wild. Get all these stats. The average U.S. office worker spends 28% of their entire day just managing email.
Over a quarter of the day.
Just reading and replying. Furthermore, we spend an average of 31 hours a month in entirely unproductive meetings. And what are we actually doing in those meetings?
Mostly not paying attention, I bet.
Exactly. 73% of us are doing other work. We're literally sitting in a room, nodding, pretending to listen, while secretly typing the work we should have been doing at our actual desks.
Yeah, we are trapped in a cycle of performative work. And the physical spaces we occupy, they're designed to enforce that performance rather than, facilitate actual deep thought.
Oh, the open plan office. Don't even get me started.
Right. We tend to think of the modern open plan office as this hub of progressive, tech-forward collaboration. It looks great on a corporate brochure.
Very Silicon Valley.
But the concept actually originated in 1950s Germany. It was known as Bürolandschaft, or office landscape.
Wait, the 50s?
Yes. It gives management the illusion of flexibility and egalitarianism, but it completely ignores human biology and the basic requirements for deep cognitive focus.
Because you literally can't focus when Dave from accounting is eating crunchy snacks 3 feet away from your left ear.
Exactly that, but on a neurological level. Human beings do not thrive in a constant state of sensory distraction. When you have no physical barriers, your brain is constantly processing peripheral movement and noise.
So you're always on edge.
Yes, it keeps your nervous system in a low-level state of fight or flight. You never drop into a true flow state. And beyond the psychological toll, there is a physiological one.
Like actually getting sick.
Yeah. Because of the shared air and constant proximity, people working in open plan offices take 70% more sick days than remote workers.
70%, that's massive.
We are quite literally clinging to physical structures that actively make us less productive, more stressed, and physically ill.
And it isn't just the physical architecture, is it? It's the bizarre cultural expectations we attach to that space.
Yeah.
Like this deep-seated issue of cultural presenteeism.
Oh, the workplace martyrs.
Yes. The person who stays at their desk until 9 p.m., they aren't actually doing anything productive. They're probably just scrolling the internet. But they stay just to be seen by the boss.
Just for optics.
Right. And what's wild is how this dysfunction mutates across different global cultures. Like, in the Netherlands, staying late is widely frowned upon.
Really?
Yeah, the cultural assumption there is that if you are working late, you are simply bad at your job and incapable of managing your time efficiently.
That's a healthy perspective.
But then over in South Korea, the expectation to bond and socialize with your team after hours is so intense that workers consume an average of 14 shots of hard liquor a week just to keep up with workplace socializing expectations.
14 shots. That is the ultimate triumph of visibility over actual value.
It's terrifying.
It is. The underlying psychological mechanism keeping us tied to these desks is what we can call an Industrial Revolution hangover.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, our modern management systems were essentially built for a time when human beings had to be physically chained to heavy, immovable machinery, like a textile loom, during daylight hours to produce anything of value.
Right, you had to be there to pull the lever.
Exactly. The factory dictated the schedule because the factory owned the tools of production. But today, the work is highly cognitive, and the machinery is just a lightweight laptop sitting in your backpack.
Yeah.
But management structures still rely on bums on seats to measure loyalty. Why? Because it is infinitely easier for a manager to measure your physical presence than it is to measure the actual quality of your intellectual output.
So it's basically just lazy management. But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here. Aren't rules and schedules necessary for a complex business to function? Like, if everyone is a roaming multi-hyphenate, working whenever they feel like it, how does anything actually shift?
Sure.
Because the research mentions this horrifying case of a woman being fired for being exactly 1 hour late to work, despite calling in ahead of time, because she was caring for her mother who was recovering from surgery.
Right, which is awful.
Obviously, firing her is incredibly harsh. But on some level, doesn't an employer have the right to expect you to show up when you agreed to show up?
They absolutely do, and coordination is obviously necessary. But the friction arises when the demands become entirely asymmetrical. We are punishing people for not adhering to an industrial-era clock-like, firing them for being an hour late, while simultaneously demanding digital-era 24/7 availability.
Ah, right. The double standard.
With smartphones, our standard 7.5-hour workday has quietly ballooned into a 9.5-hour workday.
Oh, easily.
Because we are answering emails on the train, during dinner, and in bed. Employers are perfectly happy to let work bleed into our personal time via technology, but they rigidly refuse to let personal life bleed into work time.
It's a one-way street.
Exactly. And to truly break free of this and embrace a custom-tailored career, we have to look deeper. We put up with this asymmetrical arrangement because we're still chasing a highly toxic, media-driven definition of success.
Which brings us perfectly to success porn.
Yes.
It is so pervasive online today. It is this highly curated, aesthetic version of achievement that makes everyone feel like they are constantly failing.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It's the Instagrammable girl boss running her supposed empire from a luxury villa in Bali, always looking perfectly rested.
Right, with the perfect matcha latte.
Exactly. Or it's those aggressive Pinterest memes that scream things like, I'd rather hustle 24/7 than slave 9 to 5.
Yeah.
It completely glorifies extreme burnout under the guise of glamorous entrepreneurship.
It presents a very dangerous binary to the public. It tells you that if you aren't working a corporate job you absolutely despise, your only other acceptable option is to be hustling and grinding around the clock for your own brand.
Like there's no middle ground.
None. And neither of those extremes is conducive to a sustainable, happy human life. Furthermore, success porn tightly links the concept of a good life entirely to endless visible ambition.
Yes.
It turns life into an infinite treadmill where you must constantly achieve the next big public milestone just to validate your existence.
The pressure is exhausting.
Yeah.
I really related to an anecdote Emma Gannon shares about her own childhood in the book. She talked about actively avoiding classroom competition.
Oh, the Monopoly story.
Yes. She would purposely be mediocre at board games like Monopoly. While everyone else was losing their minds, screaming and stressing out trying to build hotels on Boardwalk, she would just sit there peacefully counting her little stack of $1 bills.
That's hilarious and honestly kind of genius.
The logic is brilliant. If you establish yourself as mediocre, you completely bypass the intense anxiety of high expectations. You don't have to constantly defend that top-tier status.
Right, you just fly under the radar.
But as adults, we completely lose that wisdom. We get sucked into the digital validation machine. We post our career wins on LinkedIn. We get the dopamine hit of the likes and comments. And suddenly we are in a brutal competition with our own last success.
We really are. And we must tread carefully when we start dismantling these ideas of ambition, particularly regarding gender nuances in the workplace.
Oh, for sure.
The research points out a very clear, impartial reality regarding this. Finding work emotionally fulfilling is a wonderful goal. And stepping away from the toxic 24/7 hustle is absolutely necessary for mental health. But for women in the workforce, emotional fulfillment cannot be weaponized as an excuse for the existing gender pay gap. which in the UK was cited at 22.6%.
That is a huge gap.
It is. The societal assumption that women are simply happy doing caring or emotionally fulfilling jobs should never be a substitute for equal hard cash compensation. Cash is still the primary metric of equity in a capitalist system.
Yeah, fulfillment doesn't pay the rent.
Exactly. And this raises an important question. If we recognize that the system is flawed, and we aren't chasing the 24/7 hustle, and we aren't just blindly climbing the corporate ladder for status, how do we actually measure a life well lived? What are we chasing?
I genuinely struggle with this.
Mhm.
Because if we throw out the old metrics like the fancy title, the corner office, the constant promotions, how do you know if you are actually doing well?
This is where the concept of the success pie chart becomes incredibly practical.
I love the pie chart.
Rather than adopting society's metric, you literally graph out what makes a good day for you personally. You allocate percentages to the things that actually make you feel balanced and fulfilled, not what looks impressive to a stranger on the internet.
Yes. Gannon's own pie chart is so wonderfully specific. She doesn't just put wealth or power. She has it sliced up like this. 25% of her success is having the time to spend on her own well-being.
Which is huge.
Right. And then 20% is a sense of creative fulfillment in her daily tasks. 25% is having the schedule flexibility to actually see her friends and family. 15% is traveling.
Okay, and what's the last piece?
My absolute favorite slice. A very modest 5% dedicated simply to being able to afford a new throw for the sofa.
That is amazing.
Isn't it? It isn't about private jets or retiring at 30. It's about the tangible, cozy reality of a life that feels good on a Tuesday afternoon.
That pie chart is profound because it shifts the entire mechanism of measurement from outward validation to inward satisfaction. But implementing that shift within a traditional company often causes massive friction. To understand why your boss might push back on your desire for flexibility, we have to recognize that different generations are essentially running entirely different operating systems when it comes to the concept of work.
Oh, the generational clash.
We aren't just arguing about software, we are arguing about foundational worldviews shaped by completely different economic realities.
Let's look at that programming, because it explains so much of the tension in group meetings today.
Yeah.
You start with the silent generation, born between 1925 and 1945.
Right.
Their formative years were defined by the Great Depression and global war. So for them, work wasn't about fulfillment. It was about sheer survival. Their operating system is built on extreme dedication, risk aversion, and this seen and not heard mentality.
Very rigid.
Yeah. Then you have the baby boomers. They grew up in a massive post-war financial boom. Corporate structures were expanding rapidly, but there were also huge populations of peers competing for those spots. Right. And that environment bred intense competition and really cemented the idea that you must aggressively climb the single ladder to win the game.
Exactly. Then Generation X arrives. They were the latchkey kids who watched their boomer parents give their absolute souls to corporations, only to get mercilessly laid off during the economic downturns of the 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah, the loyalty meant nothing.
Exactly. Gen X reacted to that trauma by essentially inventing the concept of the work-life balance. They began questioning corporate authority and erecting boundaries.
Which paves the way for the millennials.
Right. Millennials are the first truly global-centric generation. They grew up exactly as the internet was growing up, giving them unprecedented digital fluency.
True.
But crucially, they graduated from university directly into the massive 2008 global economic recession. That combination is vital to understand.
Because they had no other choice.
Precisely. They didn't start side hustles just because they were passionate about artisanal soap. They developed side hustles because the entry-level jobs disappeared. The multi-hyphenate lifestyle was born out of economic necessity and a deep distrust of single-source corporate income.
And finally, you have Gen Z, true digital natives who never knew a world without smartphones. They see right through the illusion of corporate loyalty, and they heavily prioritize purpose, inclusion, and social activism in their work.
They will not put up with the old rules.
No, they will simply quit if a company's values don't align with their own. And the cost of ignoring these deeply ingrained operating systems is astronomical. You can't just force a Gen Z worker who values flexibility and purpose into a rigid, silent generation management mold and expect them to thrive.
It just doesn't compute.
The financial data proves it. Replacing a single staff member who quits in frustration costs a business an average of £30,614. That is a massive amount of money being set on fire simply because Legacy companies stubbornly refuse to adapt to how modern human beings actually want to work.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating this generational minefield?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the real divide in the workplace isn't actually between a rigid boomer manager and a rebellious millennial employee. The generational labels are almost a distraction.
Really? How so?
Well, the real conflict we are all facing, regardless of the year we were born, is the battle between our limited human attention span and an unfiltered digital world. The author quotes journalist Tom Friedman, who famously referred to the internet as an open sewer of untreated, unfiltered information.
That is quite the visual.
Right. We are all drowning in this overwhelming flood of data, emails, Slack messages, and success porn. The multi-hyphen method isn't just about having 3 jobs. It is about building a filter.
A filter for the sewer.
Yes. It is about actively deciding to use technology to empower your specific personal pie chart, rather than passively letting technology dictate your anxieties and ambitions.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. The internet, despite its flaws, has fundamentally leveled the playing field.
Completely.
You no longer need to put on a suit, walk into a physical bank, and beg a gatekeeper for a massive loan to start a project. You don't need a corporate sponsor to reach an audience. You can be a career chameleon.
I love that phrase, career chameleon.
Your intrinsic self-worth does not have to be tied to a single static job title that fits neatly onto an old-fashioned piece of paper. You can be an accountant who runs a vintage clothing store online. You can be a primary school teacher who produces a highly niche podcast on the weekends. You have the permission and the tools to build your hyphens exactly how you want them.
You do. But as we close this deep dive, there is a fascinating, almost existential tension we have to consider regarding the future of this concept.
Okay, what's that?
Well, this foundational text was published in 2018. In internet years, that is an absolute eternity ago.
Oh, basically ancient history.
Crucially, it was written before the massive, world-altering explosion of generative AI. The entire premise of the multi-hyphen method is about using digital tools to empower us, to work less, execute digital side hustles efficiently, and create more personal freedom.
Right.
But what happens to the modern multi-hyphenate when artificial intelligence can execute those digital side hustles, the copywriting, the coding, the digital graphic design, in absolute seconds for free?
Wow. That completely changes the landscape of the side hustle.
It does. Will the next era of the multi-hyphenate force us to abandon digital skills altogether?
That's a crazy thought.
Because if AI entirely claims the digital realm and drives the value of digital labor to zero, perhaps the only way to build our hyphens in the future will be through purely physical, uniquely human, offline experiences.
Back to the real world.
Exactly. The baker, the community builder, the physical artisan. The very digital technology that initially freed us from the office might be the exact thing that pushes our hyphens back into the tangible, physical world.
That is a staggering thought to leave on. As you go about your day to day, think about your own career mountain. Maybe the goal isn't to reach that blurry peak through sheer exhaustion and overtime anymore.
Maybe there is no peak.
Exactly. Maybe the ultimate goal is to realize you don't have to climb their mountain at all. You can just build your own climbing frame right down at base camp, fill it only with the things that actually matter to your personal pie chart, and finally, just enjoy the view. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.